Hi, thank you all for joining us today on Mala's webinar on perspectives of virtual learning. My name is Ahmed Flex Omar. I'm the Deputy Director, CXO, co-founder of Mala, and I'm going to be moderating the panel today. I want to give everyone, 1 minute, to join the conversation before we officially start. Okay, welcome again. Tell you a little bit about Mala if you're not familiar with Mala. Mala is the Muslim American Leadership Alliance. We're a 501c3 organization that was started in Chicago, and our focus is on storytelling and sharing stories from our community. Mala celebrates diversity and inclusion, and since COVID hit, we've been really looking for ways to support our community through a variety of webinars, and we've been really successful at that. And you can check out all our programming on YouTube and Facebook. And today's topic is on education and on virtual learning. And we have incredible panelists today. And our first panelist is Lisa Prock, and Lisa is a good friend of mine, and she's also the founder of Tea Time Socials. And also we have Zainab Khan, executive director and co-founder of Mala, and Shireen Suleiman, who's an artist, educator, and human rights advocate. I wanted to make sure that I got that right. We looked at the registrations, and we noticed that the folks that are joining us today are primarily parents, students, educators, people that are tech developers, but also community leaders. This topic about, going back to school in the fall impacts not just, parents, but folks from so many different areas and sectors. I would like to start the conversation, since we're focusing on virtual learning today, with Lisa. Lisa, what experience do you have with virtual learning, or if you want to just share some quick thoughts on today's topic?
Yeah, of course. Well, first of all, like most of us, I've had very little experience with it because it all hit in March so fast. So I think we're all still very new to this, and come fall, we're going to see new things. I would say at the micro level, everything's going to be different from what I'm hearing from school to school. But from my experience, it's interesting because we recently moved. So the past school that we were at, our virtual learning experience was very different. We had no webinars. It was completely different from what I'm hearing the new school's going to be. So my experience in the past, I'm hoping it's going to be better come future because I'm hearing of new plans. My children, personally, we struggled a lot with the previous virtual learning experience, but I brought on a lot of things as
How old
mom.
were they?
I have a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old. Yeah, so I think our hardest part is we lost the emotional connection to our teachers in when everything happened in March, and that was really hard, especially in my daughter. My son, he was more okay in some ways, but Emma, she really struggled with, she loves her teacher. She's so one-on-one. She loves the emotional part of being in the classroom. So that was certainly our biggest struggle, but we worked through it.
Oh, absolutely. And
Yeah,
you also not homeschooling your children, but you're also homeschooling your sister's children at the moment?
yes, yeah, I helped them as well. They came to my house a lot. She's an NP, so she's on the front lines of the pandemic, helping at the hospital, and she doesn't get home till 7 o'clock at night. So they oftentimes come to my home so I can help them to get them on their computer and open up their books, because they're in, gosh, I should know, although I just schooled them. They're in 4th and 6th grade now.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's definitely having from kindergarten to 6th grade.
No, absolutely. Well, we do appreciate the
Interesting.
work your sister is doing on the front lines, and also the
Yeah.
work that you're doing and taking care of not only your children, but also your sister's, children. You did mention that before this, you didn't have a whole lot of experience with virtual, learning. Has that changed now? Do you see yourself
Yes.
being in front of the screen more often?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's so interesting, and I found so many tools as well that, the school provides us with tools, but I feel like as parents we have to individualize our children, because this whole virtual experience is so different. We're all human, and we're all different. And in the classroom we get a totally different experience, but when we're online, certain tools don't fit certain kids.
Mhm.
My kids, they love Khan Academy. They did great. We were using other tools, and they're like, this is not the same. This is not the same. And then we tried and we tested, and sometimes too, we just had to kind of skip that whole schedule. I tried to keep them on a schedule, but sometimes if they were just overwhelmed, and this is also new and such a huge change, we just took a break and we went for a walk, and I'm like, okay, we'll finish this later. We're gonna go back to it as long as it all gets done and they're still learning, changing up the learning experience. We would go for a walk. My favorite part of my favorite parts of the virtual learning was going outdoors and looking at things that were like shapes, for example. My children are little, so identify all the shapes in the houses or the trees, and jot them down in a notebook. More so nature learning, I would say.
Mhm.
Switching things so that, because they're not in the classroom, so still putting them somewhere else where they're safe, but outside in a different environment, and switching things up.
Absolutely. No,
Yeah.
that's really
Bike
cool.
rides.
Yeah, bike rides. Yeah,
Lots of
nature.
bike rides.
Great. And Zainab, what is your experience with virtual learning?
Hi, Flex. No, thanks so much for this conversation. It's so needed, and I can keep rambling off on this.
Yeah.
So my experience right now has been very limited. I have a 2-year-old at home, and in many ways, it's been a blessing because he's not yet of school age. Yet at the same time, he's at that phase where he's a sponge. So everything that is being introduced to him, he's picking up on, whether it's facial expressions, language, behaviors, nonverbal things, everything. He's just picking everything up. And one of the things that obviously I had before COVID hit was I was taking him in to like a Montessori learning kind of a place for 3 hours a week or 3 hours a day for, 3 days a week. And unfortunately, he hasn't been going in for that since COVID hit. And my husband's a physician, so he's also been working really, really long hours. So I kind of had to put on dual hats as a caretaker, teacher. We're at that phase right now where we're doing language, ABCs, potty training, all these things. But the biggest concern for me is obviously the social learning aspect, because this is the age where regardless of whatever content you may have or whatever resources you may have on a digital screen, it's just not the same when it comes to teaching or helping a child who's developing these skills so fresh and raw right now. And the socializing skills, I think, are really what is concerning to me moving forwards is, okay, at the ages of 2, 3, 4, what is he going to be doing? How is he going to be interacting? How is he going to learn how to share, how to show empathy? I don't live with extended family. So unfortunately, my son is just with me all the time. We don't have a lot of neighbors with kids either. And so it's been a little challenging.
Zainab, I think your hand's on the mic.
Oh, hi, sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, yeah. So essentially, that's my current experience right now with virtual learning. Now, I also have 3 nieces who are of school age, and I know my sister has been homeschooling them. And that's been a challenge. I mean, when you have 3 different children in 3 different grade levels, and you yourself, teachers go through schooling and training and understand learning and development and behaviors of each, different child stage and grade. So all of a sudden to have parents take that role on, it's been, what I've heard also is it's a challenge. It's a challenge, and that's the new reality of post-COVID that we're seeing.
Absolutely. And you have a toddler at home, and he was attending daycare at the time. Was there any virtual learning over there, or was it focus was more on interacting, with the
There
other
was no
children?
virtual learning over there, so they would have no screens, no iPads, and it was very much hands-on interaction with other children
Mm-hmm.
and peers. So that essentially has been, that peer connection has been a challenge to replace, and it's not replaceable via virtual at
Mm-hmm.
this stage for a 2-year-old.
Got it. Thank you for sharing that, and also thank you to your husband and the work that he's doing, and to you as well. For everything that you're doing. Shireen, thank you for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with virtual learning as an educator?
Well, first of all, again, I want to thank you very much for having for having created sort of the space to have this conversation. It's really integral to everyone's life, whether it's obviously the K through 12. I'm here to speak on my experience as an educator. I'm a professor at higher education level, but I'm also a parent. So I'm also experiencing it from both angles, as a parent of a high schooler and also a parent of a rising college sophomore. So seeing it from all the different angles, experiencing it, when we talk about virtual learning, again, it's sort of this one big catch-all phrase, but there's a lot to unpack there, right? So I think if I'm understanding correctly, maybe I think Lisa was talking about like the first school did it one way, another school is going to do it another way. If I understand, I think she might have been talking about this idea of how different organizations, how they structured synchronous versus asynchronous learning. And so that was something that, again, I think that was probably a pivotal key in terms of like what could we take away in terms of what could be the successes here for, for that ratio, how much synchronous to asynchronous. When you were introducing me and I sort of said, community advocate, that word community for me is key, right? So when we are in a classroom, we're cultivating a culture of community. And so those synchronous moments, those touch points where we're able to gather together, where we're able to sort of simulate, those human relations that are, these are ways that we can pick up on one another's nonverbal cues. We can sort of, pick up on, who's just that, the eye contact, who's following, who's, falling behind, maybe who looks a little bit unsure, who looks a little sort of not quite right today. How can I make sure that I reach out and address them personally so that I'm bringing them in, so that I'm making people feel that we're still connected. And so I did hear, my goodness, what I heard. So as part of a community advocate, being very, very sort of intrinsically linked in my community here in Astoria, Queens, seeing so many of the parent groups, people who suffered. And I can't imagine people, there's one mother that I know in particular, she has a kindergartner, and the teacher went all asynchronous. I can't even imagine that, right? So what is kindergarten at that point? It's simply just doing a bunch of worksheets and that's it. You've lost, as Zainab said, all of the crucial social development, meeting those milestones, understanding that socialization, understanding again too, sort of how do we connect with one another as humans beyond the screen, even the screen, which is this false way that we're connecting, right? So the way that you're seeing me now is just me sort of in this little box. You're not able to see sort of the rest of, the body language. You're not able to, normally again too, we have established as a society, an acceptable sort of amount of space that we give each other, right? So that we're not intruding on one another's space. This is not that space at all. You're right up in my face right now by me being in this screen, right? So all of it is sort of contrary to the way that we're socialized as humans. So I think the synchronous to asynchronous piece, I think is something that needs to be stressed. We're here to talk about challenges. I'm all on board for the next hour to talk about the challenges, but if I could talk about, you know, any of the opportunities or the possibilities, I think that there's a lot of strategies that can be put in place where we're having these moments where we're connecting in a synchronous way. So I think that that was maybe something I wanted to address, and for Zainab as well, for everybody who has these younger kids. For me, speaking at the higher ed level, it was something that for me was also a challenge, or for the students. I mean, we cannot underscore the emotional, socio-emotional toll of this surreal experience that we're all, that we're all together experiencing, right? So the fact that we're going through a pandemic, when I was, trying to run my classes and I'm trying to go on Zoom, I have to let the mic off for a little bit because they have to be able to hear me. But meanwhile, they're hearing the sirens in the background. I'm very well aware that the sirens are constantly happening in the background. And it's jarring, right? So it's like, we can't sort of pretend, even though it's this nice fall sanitized spot where everybody has a box, but we can't pretend that there's not a pandemic. And then obviously on the heels of that, the social justice movement that we're seeing, it takes a toll. So one thing, for example, is that quite frankly, we get that Zoom fatigue, right? So we know that that's real on our eyes. As you were saying, we were talking about, for us being so close to one another. So we have to be aware that that Zoom fatigue is real. So suggestions are obviously keeping those synchronous moments, shorter spurts so that we don't have that fatigue. But also, what was I going to say? As far as the Zoom, something that was a challenge is that not everybody wants to put their camera on all the time. Some people are just not, it's hard. I'm having a hard day. Maybe I don't need you to see you. I don't know if you can hear the sirens in the background.
Yeah, it's right on cue.
There you go. So it's part of our reality. And so not everybody needs to be on camera the whole time. They get that Zoom fatigue. My students, if we're, to make light of it, for my class that starts at 9, for my students in California, it's 6 o'clock in the morning. They're not feeling me at 6 o'clock in the morning. So that camera is off, right? And so then at that point, I'm talking to like a sea of just black screens, and so how does that, affect like how we engage as a community? And so one last thing, and then I know that we want to move on to so many other topics, but as far as that experience goes, when we're talking about learning and education, Lisa also mentioned Khan Academy, right? So, I mean, there's different styles, different purposes, different strategies for different outcomes. What is it that you want? So if I want, for example, to learn how to cook, a particular meal for tonight, I can go on a recipe. I'll just watch a YouTube video. That's done. I don't need any of that human interaction. I don't need somebody to call me by my name and say, Shireen, do it this way. I can just go on the YouTube video, watch it, and that's fine. But there's so much critical learning and education that does need to be done, I think, in a more mindful, connected way.
No, absolutely. And, thank you for sharing your experience and also the challenges, that you're facing as an educator. And we also want to thank you for everything that you're doing, because we still need our, teachers, and but these are tough times, for everyone. We can jump into the opportunities. And Shireen, you mentioned that you are teaching classes in different time zones in California. Can you tell us a little bit about how this come about, and because right now with a lot of webinars, by virtue, any event that you do, you're technically, you're broadcasting to the internet, so anyone can join. Is this something new for you, or is this something that you've always, done in terms of, teaching, students online? Can you just share a little bit about, that?
So I'm lucky in that for most of the trajectory of my career, as far as fashion, as far as education, I've been heavily focused on the digital side, but I teach mostly Adobe Creative Suite. So 2D digital, some light video. So the idea of technology wasn't the hurdle, but yes, the idea of, mindful pedagogy, right? Like that's the underlying, foundation is sort of, what is, to just choose a mode of technology. There's a million things out there actually, right? But to choose it mindfully, what's the right technology for the right purpose? And so the idea of time zones, for example, it's again, one of the opportunities that I would say is that by having things on Zoom after this, for example, a lot of people who might not have been able to tune in, they'll have access to it later. So it accommodates bringing people together in a way that transcends place. So we don't necessarily have to be tied to, you know, like, for example, all of us here, obviously from different states, right? So we don't necessarily have to be tied to who else, you know, for times that I've worked with Mala in the past, who happens to be in New York for that week, right? So I think that that's one of the opportunities. But again, I think that, you know, with what happened in the spring, and we don't know yet what's happening in the fall, not everybody necessarily signed up for this. As far as the educators and the teachers, not everybody signed up to be a Zoom professional and to set up, you know, Facebook Lives and everything. They signed up for, you know, getting their hands dirty and rolling their sleeves up and, you know, getting on their knees and working with kids in the, and on you know, on carpet time, on, you know, on morning time. And they didn't sign up for this. So it's like, you know, we have to be resilient. We're aiming for that resiliency. And we have to keep, obviously, sort of, you know, what could we do now? What are the opportunities that this presents that we couldn't have had, you know, in a traditional setting? But yes, I mean, sort of being aware, again, that human piece, I don't even want to say that we could replicate it. I don't think it's a smart strategy to say, let's try to pretend, like, let's get this as close to normal as possible. I think we have to just understand that this is just its own different thing. So yes, being able to, that my students in overseas in Asia and California and all the different time zones, they can jump in at different times, they can catch what they missed. For people who have different learning abilities, I actually think I know that I talk a little bit faster than might be really ideal for some people who are speaking English as a second or third language. So to be able to slow me down and like pause and then rewind and hear me again, that's a plus, right? So there are, you know, there's those.
What kind of support are you getting as an educator from institutions and you know, groups that you work with?
Well, I think Lisa and Zaina both kind of touched on it. I think, to be honest, yes, you know, as much as the institutions, even at that time in triage, when we were like, when we had like literally just a matter of a few days and we had to instantly be able to move the classes and everything had to go online. Even during that time, the different institutions that I work at, they did the best they could to offer a lot of professional development for the teachers. But I do think in the end, it really depends on sort of, you know, how badly do you want to do this in a way that's authentic and meaningful for you or for your children or for your students. So it's up to us to sort of, you know, seek out a lot of those resources. Because again, different ages, different stages, different subject matter, different content, and you know, again, what is the right technology for the right time? You know, it's a puzzle, and so it's up to each of us to customize that puzzle.
Thank you so much. Now I'm going to pivot to Zainab. Zainab, discuss some of the challenges and some of the opportunities. You know, as someone who is trained in the field of psychology, can you touch upon a little bit on the challenges and the opportunities in terms of, you know, development in that area? What challenges students are facing, you know, in different stages, and then what opportunities are there through virtual learning?
Absolutely, absolutely. And so just so everybody knows, in a past life and even currently right now, in addition to Mala, I am a licensed clinical psychologist, and my area of specialty was neuropsychiatric testing for children that were literally newborns up to the age of 12. And obviously, when it comes to development, when it comes to learning, when it comes to abilities, when it comes to disabilities, when it comes to special needs, we're in a very challenging position right now. I can honestly say that it's challenging for someone, a child who may be on the autism spectrum or Asperger's spectrum, socializing skills. Once that's kind of taken away, the structure, the routine, the discipline, these are very massive challenges for parents. Many parents are not equipped to, you know, the school system, the actual physical school, and the structure and the schedule is what provides the discipline, the learning, the peer-to-peer social. And so once that's kind of taken away, we're kind of in that position where we don't know what to do. For children who have speech or verbal or who may be linguistically challenged, this is a very challenging time. You have to keep in mind, in a school structure, you have specialists, you have early educational interventionists, you have different subject matters that are taught, and all of a sudden we're kind of condensing everything on one platform. I strongly recommend for the individuals who are watching this to read up on Howard Gardner, Dr. Howard Gardner's theories of multiple intelligences. This is a wonderful theory and a way to break down the different ways that children and even adults have of different intelligences. So there's 8 different ones that are basically categorized, which is logical, mathematical, linguistic, musical, spatial, body, kinesthetic, naturalist, interpersonal, and intrapersonal. And the way that our school systems are set up, and our educational system is set up, linguistic and logical mathematical modalities are usually the most valued in society. But now going on everything virtual, we're losing the body kinesthetic, the interpersonal, the intrapersonal, and even the spatial way of doing things. So for example, I know my son is very, very visuospatial. And when he sees something on a screen, the letter A, it's very different than if I take his hand and I draw out the letter A. So I'm trying to say this in layman's terms, like I guess obviously comparing a 2-year-old to a 12-year-old is very different, but that hands-on component of learning is integral. And I think that the opportunities here do lie in for educators, for school guidance counselors, for early interventionists, for speech therapists, for all a range of different professions, that there is a lot more room and space for professional training, given that we are in that post-COVID-19, a lot more areas where we can now use some of the skills and the theories that we do know and how we can actually apply it to the current situation that we're all dealing with this pandemic. So I hope that kind of wraps everything up. I know I also talk pretty fast like Shireen does, so I try to, keep it in bullet points. But again, the psychologist that I am referring to is Dr. Howard Gardner, Theories of Multiple Intelligences. And again, there's like an entire book on each type of intelligence, but just to give a quick overview and background, I think it's very important for us to understand that there's different areas and components of learning. Yeah. And simply going online on one platform doesn't cover all the areas.
No, absolutely. Thank you for sharing all of that. I mean, that's an incredible amount of knowledge, and also looking at the psychological impacts is really important, because at the end of the day, we are human, and all of us have challenges when it comes to learning, and we all learn differently. I didn't even find out about that myself until I went to college. For example, I was not great at math, but it wasn't that I could not solve math problems. It's just I didn't have an interest. So I would always, just get the passing grade. But when I went to college and I took business calculus, all of a sudden it made a lot of sense, because there are business terms and I'm interested in business, and I got an A+. But it's literally the same thing. It's calculus. So understanding, the needs of, your child and, different children is really, really, important, and doing that research. And Zainab, is there something you want to add?
Yes, I also wanted to add that we also have to be extremely mindful of the children, young adults that are not in a setting that's conducive to learning at home. There are many homes where there may not be internet access, there may not be equipment, there may not be, parents at home to watch the child. There may be abuse, there may be, a lot of chaos within the household, multiple siblings, one computer, how do we share this? So all of these things have to be taken into consideration. Not everybody has that luxury. Okay, now school is out from in person, now you have to go digital. And it can be very challenging for some children who may not have conducive homes that nurture or would help with that environment. For a lot of children, school is the safe space. So this is now, again, it's a massive change for these children, psychologically, emotionally, physically, all of that to kind of soak in. and who do they go to as, you know, as a trusted source or a mentor or a teacher? These are high areas of concerns that I don't have answers to, that I think all of us have questions about. And I think we'll be seeing a lot more of these challenges in different ways. I believe that's hopefully the best of how to actually address these challenges through opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we can pivot that question to Shireen. Shireen, what are your thoughts on what Zainab, you know, just said, and how do we, you know, create, I guess, a safe space virtually for students that might not necessarily be in an environment, you know, that's safe, but still, you know, have a right to education?
Well, so here comes the social justice piece, right?
Mhm.
So I think that we are right now being afforded an opportunity to have a good and proper look in terms of, you know, what are the supports that are in place? Where are our priorities? And if we're saying that priorities are family and priorities are education as our society, you know, has defined it, you know, what are, where, you know, when we look at our budgets, when we look at that spending, when we look at policy, you know, what is in place to really bolster and boost us up and make sure that there's a well-rounded network of a suite of different services that's happening, rather than you know, really kind of pushing all of these services and all of these needs into this one physical building of the school building, right? Where we're asking, and we well know that, you know, for here in New York, for example, New York City, you know, our mayor kept the schools open, you know, far longer, you know, than was the public outcry, because he said, well, you know, if we close schools, there's a lot of people that are not gonna be able to have access to nutritious food, right? So then that makes, well, then let's have a good and proper look at, you know, like where can we divert in different funds, and where could we create other community organizations so that people would have access to food if they are having food shortages. You know, we know that at schools is where, unfortunately, as Zainab talked about, it's part of something that I do as a chair of a board for a nonprofit for domestic violence in the Muslim community. We're aware that the teachers, the staff, the counselors at school, they're the ones that have the training that they're able to spot you know, again, those nonverbal cues or irregularities in attendance or, you know, performance, et cetera. And so it's them, you know, that we're kind of saying, you know, when they are in contact with our kids, that they're able to kind of, you know, sound the alarms and get the support. What about if we could re-envision how community organizations could interact with families and neighborhoods and networks, you know, so that we could have, you know, a little bit more of a well-rounded support system, rather than all of this happening, you know, sort of in the four walls of this school, which we're now being denied. And now we're seeing so many of the crises, you know, being exacerbated and shown. We know that our students get, you know, special support services for students that have special needs, different learning abilities. Even students that are very high functioning, but just even for all of us adults, look at, you know, how we've all had to manage, you know, that basic executive functioning. How on earth do we manage our time when we don't have like a physical place and a routine and a structure? And we're asking that of our high schoolers, our middle schoolers, our elementary students, right? So, I mean, you know, what are the external supports that could be in place? You know, it's my vision, you know, of sort of, you know, what could a family human-centered society and community look like? So,
All right.
I don't
No,
know.
absolutely. Thank you for sharing all of that, and also thank you for the work that you do on the human rights side, and you know, being an advocate. This conversation is really important, because it just can't fall upon, you know, the teachers. It just can't fall upon, you know, the parents. You know, as a society, we have to look at, you know, these challenges, you know, together, and provide the right, you know, support system for all students and all stakeholders. And I live in Chicago, and I do a lot of volunteering with the Chicago Public Schools, and they're really big on, you know, STEM and STEAM, you know, education. And I know a lot of those students are coming from areas that has a high degree, you know, of violence. So the school is the safe, you know, place, but also school is where they get access to Apple computers or certain technological equipments that they don't necessarily have, you know, at home. So how would they even access, virtual learning? And this is, something that schools have to be cognizant about when they start opening in whatever capacity they're opening, whether if it's, half in class, half, virtual. They would have to lend, students, laptops or, Chrome computers. And so it's important to understand that, there needs to be equity in that area. One interesting, organization that I've heard a couple times now is Khan Academy. And Khan Academy, actually, the gentleman who founded it has a very interesting story. It all started by him tutoring his niece online via YouTube. And he noticed in the comments section that other folks were thanking him for the videos that he was creating, because then they were tutoring their children by just showing them, his, videos. And that's how Khan Academy, started. Now, Lisa, I know, right now, you're homeschooling your children, your sister's children. Have you been using, Khan Academy, and how has that experience been for you?
Yeah, we love Khan Academy. So for the younger ones, so for my son, he was in kindergarten, there's actually a Khan Academy app that you can even put on your phone and iPad and install, and that's a little bit simpler for them than the actual Khan Academy. It's Khan Academy Kids, it's called. That's the app. And then there's the regular Khan Academy. Although Matthew also jumped into Emma's first grade because he wanted to show her that he could do first grade math. They have to prove to each other all the time. So that was fun. But the way Khan Academy works is it's to me, it's a free program, first of all. It's a non-for-profit, as we saw, as you shared with me as well. So that's access without having to worry about budget, and finding a private school online for your children. And the program itself, it's very intuitive with the children. They catch right onto it. They're able to work. It's not complicated the way it works. When they do their math, when they do reading, for me, what I found, it's more focused on math than reading, and literature. For us, literature is story time. They're young. So we use it for math more so in science. But my kids, the way the system works, and it basically builds them up into different categories as they get further into it, and they do more with the program. So it builds them up onto different levels, and they get stars and all kinds of fun things, as you would in school.
Yeah. So it's gamified. You're getting, badges as they.
You get badges. Yeah. Yeah. We loved it. It was very helpful for us.
Do you think they enjoy that part because, kids these days are used to being on their on a phone or an iPad, and
Could be.
playing
Absolutely.
games, so that gamification part,
Yeah.
might be a way to hold their interest.
Yeah, it's a fun platform. It makes fun noises when you get things right and wrong. It also critiques, what's really nice about Khan Academy is when they get something wrong, it tells them to try again, but it explains the answer. And there's also videos in there where the instructors, there's an instructor in the video, and he teaches the math before they take the whole course. So it's based on different courses and different types of math, and yeah. Super cool.
So they're responding to it.
No, it's not live.
Okay.
It's like watching a YouTube tutorial.
Got it.
My children also know about YouTube now as they started their own channel.
That's
something else we started just for fun.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that, because one thing, that is missing from not being in the classroom is doing creative things in class, right? So how are you sort of encouraging them to be creative in a pandemic?
Yeah. Well, for us in our home, creativity is key. We're creative in all areas of our home. We try to make it a fun space of creation. When it comes to the pandemic, though, Emma, she'd always begged me to create a YouTube channel. And I always said, no. You're not putting yourself out there on YouTube. No way. And then when this hit, we were stuck in the house. Her and my niece Gianna, they begged to create this YouTube channel. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna let them go at it, but I'm not going to do a whole bunch to guide and spend all my energy because I also work remotely. So I told them, you guys have to do this on your own if you're gonna do it. I'll start the channel, I'll make the online stuff, the privacy stuff, but you guys actually have to create your own itinerary and what you wanna do. And next thing you know, they had their iPad up on a stand and they were doing baking in the microwave, and it was so cool to see how it all came together. They took it in different clips, and then I helped them to merge in video. I was the video editor, so to say, from my marketing background. And it all came together. And we have slowed down a little bit since summer started. We actually just did one though recently that we haven't put up yet. It's on how to make dog treats. But they've had a blast with it, and it also helped when I sent it to their teachers. Their teacher loved how they were practicing their speaking skills, because it's with the whole virtual thing, it's awkward to talk into the video camera when you're not used to it. It's a whole new space for them. So seeing them and what they were able to do and just be themselves on camera was pretty cool.
No, that's awesome. Thank you
Of course.
for doing that. And then you also created a platform to host tea parties for kids. You want to just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So with Tea Time Socials, all of our events were canceled this summer, obviously due to COVID. We cannot get together. However, I did decide to do a free program with Cantini Park at the end of July. We're going to be having our first one. And what I did is I actually created an entire how-to guide to create your own tea party. And I'm so excited to see how it comes together, because usually I'm the one who's putting it all together. But I basically provided parents to give to their children their own how-to set up, where to put the cups, where to put the table, the plates, spoons, all that fun stuff. How to make their own little treats, sandwiches, tea sandwiches, and then also a book of manners, how to invite people, how to invite either, whether it be your grandparents that's coming, or mom, dad, bunny, pretend, stuffed animal, whoever comes, the importance of invitation and manners and so on. And so we have people signed up, and it's at the end of July. I'm excited to see how it all comes together, because it is going to be virtual. And I'll be there to instruct and to talk through the whole thing.
Sure.
But yeah, this will be our first virtual tea party.
It's really cool. And also, you've done these tea parties at hospitals for kids that are sick.
Yes. Yeah. Those are my favorite ones.
Yeah. No, thank you. You're doing incredible work. You might not see yourself as an educator, but you're doing a lot of work through creative education, and kids need that outlet, so we appreciate all the work you're doing. And again, it's not easy to homeschool 5 children, and so thank you so much for everything that you're doing and sharing your story. I want to go now to the Q&A. Please post your questions in the chat or the Q&A section. The first question that I have here is for Shireen. Shireen, question says, are there challenges that could be, are these challenges could be used to boost more creative when it comes to, art, and making it more hard for students to be creative? Basically, you are a creative yourself, and you're a creative educator, and you're in fashion. How do you boost that education through virtual learning?
Thank you, Ahmed. I mean, Lisa actually touched on a lot of it, actually, in terms of sort of, what happens then when you have an experience that you're normally used to having it, again, tied to a particular place, and it's a guided experience. And then how do you turn over a lot of that structure so that people are able to, so they're independently, guiding themselves, but giving them just enough structure. So it sounds like, you know, so here's the tea party as we used to come together, and then Lisa was guiding the tea party. But now what happens when you give just enough structure and now you go off? And that's the moment actually where the amazing, like that's an explosion of creativity that's possible. As she said, she's waiting to see what happens now when you give just enough. And now things that probably you'll, I'm sure if it's like my experience, things that you wouldn't have possibly guessed, you know, they are going to start to, you know, start to manifest, right? So you're going to start to see people think about things in ways that you couldn't have possibly imagined. And so I think that that's been my experience. So having people be at home again too, like I said, I think that, you know, once you release the idea of trying to replicate the in-class experience, and try to be open to the possibilities of what happens now when we re-envision creativity. You know, so for example, you know, as a teaching artist with my own practice as a community educator, I recently had, I have a model where I work with young women and we talk about fashion and identity. And the model for that workshop and our time together in the past has always been where we do drawings. And for high school students, people that don't have enough of an art background, they're depending on me in the studio with them, and I help them with a template. I sit over them and I grab the pencil with them and we sit and do it together. So they're really leaning hard on me to do that one particular task, which is to draw that head to toe fashion look. And then when we moved to a virtual space, I was working with my research assistant, somebody much younger and somebody who's like plugged into all the social media and everything that's happening on social media. And we said, let it go. It's not going to be that drawing anymore. We don't know anymore what girls have, which pencils, who has the colored pencils, who has the markers. We don't, that equity piece, right? So we don't know, and who has access to these things, who can afford, even if I sent out a list, you know, it's not really fair. Who, you know, how do we know who can afford, who's comfortable to let their kids go to the art supply store because of COVID? So we released it, and we actually sort of started to, you know, mimic, like, what are we seeing in terms of people, you know, being creative in different ways rather than drawing the head to toe look, model it for me, what we're seeing on social media, and how people are curating their own image and sort of that creativity coming through themselves, through their clothes. You know, in fashion, obviously, we know that there's the piece where, you know, the clothing has to be made. There is that making space. We're tied to the sewing machines. We're tied to the dress forms. We're tied to the students being able to, you know, work out their patterns and draft their patterns and drape onto the form. So there is that making space. I'm not going to lie. That's the challenge, right? We have students that have access. They have the means. They have the privilege. They have access to be able to have all that and replicate it in their home studios. Not everybody does. So to balance the playing field, we lean harder into the skills where everybody, we know that through the universities, you know, they have access to the programs, they have access to, you know, to be able to create digitally these ideas and to conceptualize in a different way, leaning a little bit harder more on the 2D than the 3D for now. But even for the 3D, the making space, think about it in different ways. Maybe instead of draping with fabric, we're draping with paper. Maybe instead of sewing, you know, we are tying the two pieces of fabric together. There's ways that you can kind of like make, like, you know, a fringe and kind of tie them and fasten them in a different way. So actually it pushes, we're not able to replicate, we let that go, but we can push, and it, you know, design is problem solving. So right. To push that problem solving ability. So, you know, look around, jump around, see what you got in your house, and let's keep it going. And we've been seeing some amazing results.
No, absolutely. And a term that's in a particular area that of study now for years that has been developed is design thinking. How do you use, you know, design thinking to create, you know, a human-centered, you know, business or product and so on. So it's very, very, very interesting what you're saying. In terms of grading, because of the challenges that students are facing now, like is the grading process now more flexible?
Social justice, social justice. So again, too, so all of these norms, all of these constructs are all, we've made them all up, right? Who decides what is an A, what is a B? So for the time of the pandemic, universities at the university level, and then I saw it actually happen for my son at the high school level, public school as well. I think across the board, either they went to a pass-fail system, or one of the universities actually, and a few went to, it was called dual A. Either it was like an A because you survived and you made it to the end of the, you made it to the finish line, or A minus because maybe, you know, there was a blip in the road. So, so that to me was something that I would love to see explored a little bit further, right? Because these are sort of these arbitrary markers of, you know, who do we decide? And then when we're thinking about like who gets the A, but then what were the hurdles that they had to overcome to get that A, right? So are we acknowledging different, again, the different access, different equity, you know, the thinking about equity, different styles, what are the different hurdles that people have had to go through in life? What are the levels of privilege that people have? Getting to that final finish line to get to that A might be easier for some than for others. For people who had people suffering from COVID at home, unemployment, food shortages, food insecurity, like how to get to that A. So there's a lot that has to do with grading that I would love to have seen continue. To my knowledge, a lot of people are moving now back to quote unquote, you know, the regular grading. But I think really questioning grading. It's a time to question everything.
No, thank you so much. Next question, Zainab, how can educators at different levels, particularly in college level, support students' mental health? Actually, it's a question for both Zainab and Shireen. And how do you even do it in a virtual space?
That's very difficult. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously the nonverbal cues are a very large indicator for school counselors, teachers, building that rapport for a student to feel trusted enough to come up to a teacher to discuss issues or emotional issues or things that are maybe going on at home. We do know that there has been a very large spike in child abuse during this pandemic, as well as domestic abuse. And I don't really have an answer other than coming back to this question that came, and I'm sorry, I'm flipping around. Is there any good positive things from this experience? Is to be mindful and to be aware, and also to really value our educators and our teachers and our psychologists and our counselors, the people that are trained and have had a track record of working with our children, and they are the ones that come into first contact. So I'm actually in the process of putting together, because I have been similar to Shireen, advocacy is kind of my passion, like a huge, and not kind of, it's big for me. And I've been trying to put together a guideline on what mandated reporting for abuse is going to look like for virtual educators. That is completely new territory that we are encroaching upon. How do we legally do that? How do we medically do that? Who do we go to? How do we collect evidence? So all of this is going to be a new ball game. And when I say mandated reporting, just so people that are watching know, anybody who is in the space of education, who has contact with minors, who is also in the medical profession and is a mandated reporter. So they have to report any signs or forms or any evidence of psychological, social, physical, sexual abuse that they may feel is upon the minor itself. So how do we do this in the virtual age? This is, again, new territory for us. But again, I want to come back to the good and the positives, understanding the mindfulness and knowing that we already have these skills. It's knowing how to apply it now post-pandemic in a new world. I hope that kind of answers your question, Flex.
Yeah,
I know I don't have a direct answer as
no,
absolutely.
absolutely.
Intervention is,
Right.
but having that respect and having that cognizance of, yes, these are the people that are part of my child's life and development. When you look at it in that perspective, I think it makes a big difference.
Yeah, it's definitely uncharted territory, and showing empathy at all levels is very important, and just being there, for each other, because mental health, affects everyone. I mean, even adults are, hurting right now due to the pandemic.
Anxiety, lack of motivation, distractions,
Yeah.
children, adults with attention deficit disorder, like dyslexia. These are all very real things that are very much tied in with learning, with our everyday lives, yet now we're looking at it from very fragmented angles. I think that's what COVID has done, what virtual learning has done. And now we have to put those pieces back together in a new way. I think that's really the challenge, not just for educators, but for parents themselves, to be aware that you're not just putting your child in front of a screen and making tick boxes. Okay, my child did the assignments and everything, and it's graded and it's done and it's okay. And okay, 3 p.m. I can, I'm done. My kids are done. We're good. We can go out and play. No, it's there. It's ongoing. You actually have a lot more responsibility as a parent, I think, when you're teaching from home. I think there's a lot more pressure on educators, whether they're early childhood or college up to higher academia, to make sure that your students are learning and meeting all the objectives. So if anything, it's been more pressure, more challenging. It's not an easier way out, and we've got to put a solid roadmap for this.
Right. And let's
And a
personalize.
lot of these things we don't have answers to.
Well, and let's personalize it for just 1 second, because the next question is for you as well, and it's focusing on, as a mother of a 2-year-old, what are you doing to supplement the crucial socialization that a young toddler would normally get at a daycare? Are there virtual substitutes that are effective?
Not really. I mean, well, I'll play Little Baby Bum for him, but it requires me, and my child is very tactile. He's got to touch, he's got to move, he's high energy. I've got to show him how to draw the letter A. I've got to show him what this is. I've got to say please. I've got to say thank you. I have to go through the motions with him. And this is something that I have to do. Unfortunately, that is now a priority for me, is to make sure that he gets that interaction and he gets that learning component. I can go on YouTube and look up, Google toddler curriculums, but what good is that? I mean, I'm sure some of it is good. You can just put it up on a screen, but that's not really doing much to interact with him or to teach him. So, I mean, my child is a hands-on tactile learner, and at the age of 2, I can already tell that that's him. So I've been spending a lot of time with him one-on-one. Socializing is going to be something that he has to learn from me now. Before, I would take him to a lot of work-related events, and he's been very exposed and adaptable, but things such as sitting down, eating together, thank you, may I have this, can you share this with me, just the basics of that, I'm doing that with him.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. I know,
I don't know if I'm doing it right.
Well, it's not easy, and you're working, mother, and your husband's on the front lines, and at the same time,
Yeah. No, I said I'm trying. I did not say that I'm doing it the right way. So we'll see.
Absolutely. The final question, and anyone can take it. It's addressed for all. Do you think there's potential for this collective experience in virtual learning to help us improve how we do in-person education? Shireen, would you like to take it?
I think, ideally, if I imagine a safe return to a classroom, I just think that, the positives, like I said, would be that this has afforded us an opportunity to really look at the systems and really reconsider again, the different supports that are in place for communities, for families, looking at childcare, healthcare, access to food, access to, all of the different supports that we need as learners and as faculty, as educators, and as parents. It's very important, right? Because everybody all of a sudden, you know, got sprung into, you know, the situation. So what are the parent supports? So, you know, I just think that maybe something that we take forward is, you know, really rethinking systems. And then maybe, you know, again, on a bright note, you know, maybe we're all in a class again someday, but then we are so, enough of us are familiar enough with technology that we have somebody from Tokyo zooming in. We're able to, you know, have everything recorded so that students who weren't there that day, they were absent, they can catch up and they don't have to lag behind. We have, you know, access now to bring people together in a different way. So maybe that's something positive, I think.
No, absolutely. Um, and this could be also the final words for everyone because we're officially hit the hour mark. Lisa, if you want to say a few words, maybe addressing that question or just in general, in terms of, you know, where virtual learning in the future and where we go from here, and, you know, the positives.
Yeah. You know, one of my biggest things is I feel like we have so much media in our lives. We're on Facebook Live right now. We all know what Facebook and Instagram and social channels do. They share a lot of information. I'm in a lot of mom groups on Facebook, and there are so many opinions out there, and moms who are asking, what are we doing? Should we send our kids back to school? There's so much pressure in so many different angles. In my personal opinion, and like everybody said, I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but it's working for me and it's working for my family and my children, is we're just going on it on an individual level. I'm using facts, but I'm also using what's best for my child at this moment. Sometimes if you overload yourself with too much information and you read 1,000 comments on what other moms are doing in their neighborhoods, and they're like, oh, they're creating 10 pods of kids over here for learning so that we can do all remote learning and not go back to school at all, or we're completely taking them out of the education system. These are huge decisions. So of course, learn from other people, but just sometimes you just have to go down to the individual level and say, okay, what is going to work for us? Are you a working mom? Are you a single mom? Like we went back to things. Do we have the capabilities of all the technology to be successful in education? Will my child have that privilege to access education if we don't go back to school part-time? Or there's so many lenses, and none of us know what the right answer is at this point. I think just be there for your kids emotionally, and just that's really all you can do is be positive.
Absolutely.
My sister-in-law always says with the whole mask thing, she says, all right, get on your superhero capes. You know, children, they like to have fun and they like to be imaginative and they like to, it's back to that creativity. What can we do to make them feel like this is normal, although it's not normal? It could be normal for a while. We don't know when anything is going to end, or if it will. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, none of us know.
Exactly. And we're all, you know, hoping for things to get back to normal at some point. But in the meantime, it's really important, you know, to provide as much as possible a sense of normalcy for children, even though it's really hard. Thank you, Lisa. Zainab.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Zainab, if you want to just share a couple of, you know, final words and positivity, where do we go?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I echo Lisa's sentiments. Definitely, you know, focus on your own family or what is best for you. You know, right now there's a lot of pressure and a lot of groupthink and what you should do or what you shouldn't do. The most important thing is that you're safe, that you're healthy, and that you are moving at a pace that is best for your child, for your family, for your, you know, Shireen, in your case, for your profession. And again, it's going to be very uncharted. It is very uncharted territories, but we can look at it as an opportunity to improve our existing ways and methods of doing things. Just to share again with the audience, The psychologist I was talking about is Dr. Howard Gardner, Gardener. He has fascinating, he has a really fascinating theories of different intelligences, multiple intelligences, which are applicable for both children and for adults. So I highly recommend reading about that, learning up on it, and thank you for this opportunity. And Shireen and Lisa, it was wonderful to participate with you, and I definitely think we need to have a part 2 and a part 3. I definitely will keep everybody updated in regards to the mandated reporting initiatives and protocols that we will be exploring as we go through this process.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Zainab. And again, thank you to all our panelists, Lisa, Shireen, Zainab. We appreciate, all your input and sharing, your knowledge with us, but also sharing your personal journeys and struggles and challenges, not only as educators, but in different areas, but also as, parents. And personally, one thing that's super important for me and for Mala is mentorship. Mala does, a lot of, mentoring, and we've not been able to do that in a physical, space, but we've been doing it, virtually. And one of the ways that we do it is by bringing these type of, conversations. And I just because the conversations and the panels are set up for an hour, that does not mean that, this is where it ends. Please communicate with us through social media. Reach out to us via email at info@malanational.org. If you want to be a speaker, if you want to volunteer in any of our events, Mala is an inclusive organization, and it's open, to all choice and, creed. So please, reach out. This is a tough time for everyone, and nothing about this is normal. It's a pandemic, and tell yourself that you're doing great every day. Tell yourself that you're doing, great. Be there, for yourself first, because self-care is very important. If you're not taking care of yourself, it's really hard to take care of people that, you are supporting. And thank you to all our heroes. I mean, educators to me are personally my heroes. I'm a lifelong, student, and I'm gonna continue, to be a lifelong student. And I would echo also Zainab's, points that we're gonna have a part 2 and part 3, because this is an ongoing conversation, because things are constantly, changing. And I would like to say thank you again for the panelists, and we're looking forward to having you all again and on a different, panel discussion. But for now, I appreciate, the contribution and the knowledge, and I'm wishing everyone, a blessed day, and please stay healthy. And, thank you so much.